Hello and welcome to the Business of Winning podcast, brought to you by Performance Insights, providing expert speakers and hosts from the world of Formula One motor racing to corporate events and conferences worldwide. Just click on www.performanceinsights.co.uk and send us your requirements.
Well, welcome to the Business of Winning podcast and to the second part of my interview with Otmar Szafnauer, former team boss of course, Force India, and more recently of the Alpine Formula One team. We covered quite a lot of ground in the first part of this two-parter, and we started the second part of our conversation by picking up on the topic of psychological safety, and that's really the science behind running an organization in such a way that people are unafraid to speak up and speak out, speak their mind, really contribute, get everyone to lean into helping you to achieve your big ambitious goals. It's something that Toto Wolff, as the boss of Mercedes-Benz, is particularly interested in. He has spoken about in the past. So I picked up on this second part of the podcast by starting with a question to Otmar about psychological safety and his particular approach to that topic.
You know, you can't be friends with everybody. It's not about, oh, it's such a great, we're all friends, and it's not the pub. So there are some times where you've got to take hard decisions and not everybody agrees. But what you've got to do is have a culture where if somebody who disagrees with the direction that you're taking is happy enough to support it, so they don't go away grumpy or disgruntled or say, they're wrong. It's okay, this time we're going to do this, and hopefully next time, if there's a disagreement, they'll see it my way and the others will support me. You've got to create that culture. And once you have that, then everybody works together, right? You have psychological safety, plus you get the people that believe you should be going in another direction. They put that behind them and focus on the direction you're going and work to make that a success. And once you can do that, then you truly have a high-performing team. I remember saying to people, look, we should listen to everybody. You know, I had a professor once say to me, why should you listen to the lonely dissenter? You know, he said it to the whole class, not just me. And I didn't know the answer. I was 19 years old at the time. And the answer is simple. You should listen to the lonely dissenter because he may be right. So listen. Now, if he's not right, and I used to say this to people, if the lonely dissenter is not right, within 30 seconds, we should be able to point out why he's not right and why we're right. And if you can't do that within a short period of time, it's good that you listen to him. But if you can say, look, here are the reasons that you're not right. Here are the reasons that we're doing this. He'll learn something, and then he's with you. I think it was Jack Welch who said, reasonable people with the same information will come to the same conclusion. And I used to use that a lot. If we're all reasonable and we all have the same information, we should all come to the same conclusion. If we're all reasonable and some of us come to the different conclusion, we have different information. So therefore, share all the information that everyone has, and we should all come to the same conclusion. So, it's those fundamental things. And if you apply them, people respect you for applying them as a leader. And lo and behold, everyone pulls together and tries to do well for the team as opposed to their own agendas.
Otmar, if you were to, be transported into the boardroom of a large multinational company outside of Formula One, nothing to do with Formula One, what are the key ingredients you would love to bring with you from Formula One into other industries? David Coulthard and I often talk about the fact that whenever we go about our business in the big wide world, you get frustrated with customer service, with product quality or reliability, and you think, if this was Formula One, it would never be done this way. so we often talk about that. What would you bring from Formula One into the world of business if you had the opportunity?
Probably the biggest thing is the sense of urgency.
Yeah, that's a great one.
The sense of urgency, and I've seen it. We had in Hungary one year. I think we went Hungary Spa. Hungary I mean, I was told we didn't know, changed the amplitude of the rumble strips, I think on the last corner going onto the front straight. So we would, the drivers would use the entire track. They're on the rumble strips and the amplitude was higher. We started breaking rear suspension, put Hulkenberg on the roll hoop there. He roll hooped the car. But so the rear suspension was breaking over and over. We're running out of rear suspension. So I think it was rear top wishbone that was breaking. Anyway, we got through the race, and we got through the race by telling them, don't go over the rumble strips, which means you're going slower. You're not using the entire track. By Spa, which was the next race, we had a new suspension designed, manufactured, tested, and made in quantities. So it had like 10 days to redesign, remake, test to your new testing criteria, and then make them in quantities to get them out. And that sense of urgency I haven't seen anywhere else in any engineering, design, and development group that is as quick as Formula One. Nowhere.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that I would overlay. There are things that Formula One can learn from the greater industry, but there are things that the greater industry can learn from Formula One. And I know we talked about the Mayo Clinic, and it was probably the stewards that taught the Mayo Clinic this. They have that sense. When I go for a checkup at the Mayo Clinic, by the time I'm done with my stress test and I walk over to the doctor's office to sit down, which is 2 minutes away, the results are there and we're discussing them.
No, that's great. I must say, I always say to people, the thing that I love about Formula One is that the 24 races represent 24 non-negotiable deadlines, and it drives that sense of urgency exactly that you're referring to. Talking about business outside of Formula One, let's talk about your business. So Soft Power, your company, and specifically your Eventar app that you have developed. I just love the story behind this. So just for the benefit of the listeners, can you explain about Soft Power and the Eventar app, why that has been developed and it's linked back into Formula One?
Yeah, so Soft Power was a company that was started by myself and Alex Powell when I had the idea of taking all the data that the engineers get on the pit wall and being able to share the important data that they use to understand the race to the fans via their either iPhones or iPads or, when they're on the go. So we did that app in 2009. We won the company won the Sunday Times Sports App of the Year, I think in 2009 or 2010. It was also used as one of the apps that Stephen Jobs talked about in his keynote speech when the iPad came out. He featured the app. And then that company did other things after we did the app for 6 years. Liberty decided that they wanted to have one digital company as their solution to everything, all things digital at Formula One, and we're too small. So the app's now being done by somebody else. But since then, we started working with, it was Aston Martin at the time, to develop Eventar. And I remember being there, and I used to travel out mainly on Thursdays. And by the time we got to Thursday, we were on issue 9 of the travel itinerary, maybe issue 10, because it changed so much. And the more people that you have traveling, the more it changes. Somebody gets injured playing football, can't go. Somebody's wife has a baby, can't go. Other things happen. The sponsor isn't coming, so part of the marketing team decides late not to go. Anyway, my thought was and I know what happened, that 100 people traveling or 120 people traveling, every time a issue came out, they would print the itinerary, put it in their folder, ready for travel. And then issue 4 would come out, issue 3 would go in the bin, you print another one, put issue 4, and we would do, and I said to Andy Stevenson, I said, I bet you we're wasting a lot of paper, a lot of toner, because this is happening over and over. There's got to be a better way. And as it turned out, the real savings isn't in paper. The real savings is in efficiency. So what the app really does is, instead of communicating all the travel itineraries to those traveling by those who actually book the travel through spreadsheets and PDFs and emails, everyone's got an app on their phone that when they open up the app, all the information they need for the event they're going to is in front of them. And it's also interactive with the team that you're going with. So if you want to see all the information of your colleagues, that's in front of you. If you want to see the information of those who are staying in your hotel, you can search that way, and that's in front of you. If you want to communicate with just those people that are in your rental car or in your hire car, you can do that. It sets up automatically sets up communication groups by subgroups. So those that are in your flight, those that are in your hotel, those that are in your bus. What else does it do? You get your boarding pass through it. It's chronological. So once an event has happened in your itinerary, it's put in the background. You don't need to, on Sunday on your way home, you don't need to know what flight you're on coming in on Thursday. That's gone. What you need to know is, what am I doing next? And the next thing that I'm doing on Sunday is I'm getting on this bus with these 6 other people at this time, and I'm going to the airport. And when I get to the airport, here's my boarding pass, and this is a flight that I'm on. So it's chronological as well. And if something changes and it doesn't have an impact on you, you never know. But if something changes and it has an impact on you, next time you open the app, it says, your flight number has changed because it's been canceled. Here's your new one, and here's your new boarding pass. And it works offline. So if you land somewhere and you don't have a signal, doesn't matter. You open up the app, all the information's still there. Now, if you're offline, you don't get updates until you're online, but it works offline. And it's so much more efficient for both those who are booking the flights and communicating the itinerary and those who are using the itinerary.
Yeah, and everything you're just talking about, first of all, you and I both know the logistics and the travel behind Formula One is the iceberg that no one ever talks about. And yet, we turn on our TVs or our streaming devices every other weekend. We see Formula One in a different country with the same group of people all there.
Yeah.
Also within the work that we do at Performance Insights, we do, we get involved in several hundred corporate events a year. And I think I was telling you before our podcast recording started, I was at an event in Vietnam recently, and I think there were 500 delegates from 32 countries or something. And the event organizer was saying to me, like, it had taken months and months of detailed work and multiple itineraries. And I mean, exactly to your point,
this would be perfect for that.
People changing hotel rooms, and someone can't come because they've fallen ill, and someone else says, "Oh, I'm going to come at the last minute and I need a flight," and all that kind of stuff. And it's amazing how many organizations are still doing it manually or on a dreaded Excel spreadsheet that everyone's desperately trying to update.
Yeah, I mean, the app is called Event R, so it's EVENT and the letter R from racing. It was designed and developed for race teams predominantly, but it works for all sorts of organizations. And it just makes everything much, much more efficient. People don't miss flights anymore because they have the right information in front of them. I'll give you just a small example. The first team to use it was High Tech Formula 2 team. They have one lady who coordinates all the travel and the itineraries, Victoria. And Victoria used to tell me Sunday she would get 15 to 20 phone calls from the mechanics that were tearing down the cars, because it was easier for them to call Victoria to say, when are we leaving for the airport and what flight am I on? It was harder for them to search through their emails to actually find the itinerary that she produced.
Yeah.
So that, I used to get 10, 12, 15 phone calls on a Sunday. Now she gets 0. And the reason she gets 0 is it's easier for them to click on the app, the icon, to open up the app. And the next thing in front of them is when they're leaving for the airport and what flight they're on. It's just easier than making the phone call and hoping Victoria answers. So it's just much, much more efficient.
How can people find the app? Is it available on the all the usual
Yeah,
Apple?
iOS and Android platform. If there's 8 of you or less traveling together, it's free. 8 of you going golfing in Scotland, you can enter your data and everybody can see each other's itineraries. So if you've got people coming from America, you can see what flight they're on, when they land. You wait for them with the rental car, don't you? If it's more than 8, then there's also a coordinator hub. And then after that, we adjust the price accordingly based on how many people use it, how often it's used. But yeah, so 8 or less, it's free. Eventar, and if there's large groups, if there's a large group of say 1,500 cardiologists going to some symposium in Vegas, it's a one-time fee to use it. But if it's a Formula One team that has 130 travelers to 25 events, it's a different fee because you're using it over and over.
So, Otmar, final question I have for you, which just fascinated me when I listened to the podcast that you did with Tom Clarkson, good friend to both of us. This was the Beyond the Grid podcast that you did back in July 2023. Most people remember that podcast for you talking about how Alpine was going at the time. But one thing that fascinated me was you talked about the fact that a Formula One team should be more like pirate ship, not like the Navy. I just loved how you explained that. So just talk to us about why do you want to be a pirate and less like the Navy? And again, what can business learn from that?
To me, if you're running a massive corporation where process is key to be able to replicate and control, say, quality, or having a product that's homogenous, then you've got to be a Navy. How do you get 40,000 or 400,000 people to do the same thing to make sure that the product that they produce, if that's what you're producing, or the service that you give, is exactly the same and to the specifications that the company has set out? You've got to be a Navy. Mm-hmm. But with being a Navy comes some inefficiencies. You don't react as quickly. That sense of urgency that we just talked about, that sense of urgency comes from being pirates. You're a Navy. Yes, you're fighting other navies. Pirates, you're fighting other ships. But when you're board a ship as a pirate, you're not going to listen to what the general says. You're just going to go and cut throats as much as you can to make sure that you're getting the loot. You know what I mean? So Formula One teams, it is that sense of urgency. It's that sense of being able to adjust to your circumstance quicker than the others. And that quick adjustment to the adjusting circumstance, that change, will give you a strategic advantage. Just like I talked about, having new rear suspension in 2 weeks. Navies don't do that. Pirates, and if you're working in aerospace, it's years before you see something you've designed actually on a rocket ship, 4 or 5 years, or on an airplane. With us, we had interns from, I remember, Bath University, mechanical engineering intern. And it was a lady, smart girl. She designed a part that actually was raced, right? So she started as an intern, didn't know a thing about Formula One team, 3rd year mechanical engineering student. By her end of her internship, she was there for a year. There are parts on the car that she designed that we were racing. And only pirates do that. And I remember the head of mechanical design saying, as a leaving gift, because she was going to do her final year, we're going to give her the part that she designed that was raced. Where else does that happen?
So one of the really interesting case studies in Formula One in terms of lack of success was Toyota. And I did a lecture with Mike Gascoigne, actually, at London Business School for a group of MBA students a few years back. And we sort of drilled into why Toyota struggled in Formula One. Of course, famously, they never won.
10 years?
Yeah, a decade in Formula One. And thinking about what you're saying, Toyota ran their Formula One, or wanted to run their Formula One team like the Navy. It was all about the Toyota way. It was about Kaizen. It was about process. But there was a fundamental lack of agility and adaptability.
You Can't do that. You're right. They're a Navy. And guess what? Toyota is the most successful car manufacturer in the world. They got to be a Navy, but you can't apply that to Formula One. You got to be pirates.
Yeah.
Remember, at the beginning of this, I came to Formula One after 2 years at Cadillac and 12 years at Ford Motor Company. However, I also had 5 years of racing, ran my own team for 5 years. So I understood the difference. When I was operations director at 32 years old at British American Racing, I probably applied what I learned from Ford Motor Company. 10% of what I knew from Ford applied to Formula One. 90% didn't. And the 10% that I used to use at Ford, I actually applied. I had changed some things in Formula One that worked better from what I learned from the Navy that I was in. But 90% of it didn't. And you have to be smart enough to understand what will work and what doesn't, what slows you down. But if it slows you down, don't do it. If it organizes you better without slowing you down, do it. And that was, like I said, that was 10%.
Well, Otmar, it's been absolutely fantastic having this conversation. We could talk about so many more things. I really appreciate you giving us your time on the Business of Winning podcast. It's been great to have this conversation, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Take care.
Well, I hope, like me, you really enjoyed that conversation with Otmar Szafnauer. A really interesting guy to talk to, and a great privilege to have some quality time with him to reflect on his insights to what's been a fascinating season of Formula One 2024, but also to talk about leadership in F1 and what it's like to try and get a large group of people all pulling in the same direction, some of the cultural requirements that you need. I love the fact that he started this second part of the interview talking about psychological safety, and particularly that aspect that he talked about in terms of listening to the lone voice, the lone dissenter, the person who perhaps asks a very obvious question that no one else is asking, or indeed asks a difficult question or disagrees with the strategy that's being outlined. And I think a lot of organizations could do with that approach, because there's nothing worse than groupthink, where everyone heads off in the same direction without really questioning too deeply alternatives. And we sometimes see that even in Formula One itself. It was great to hear also about his business, Soft Power, and the development of the Eventar app, which has been developed as a result of the white heat of the complex logistics and travel involved in Formula One. So any event managers or conference organizers out there might like to try out the Eventar app. And I've certainly had a good look at it, and it's a pretty clever tool indeed. Great to also hear Otmar talk about the fact that it's so much better to be a pirate than to be in the Navy. I have to say, having worked for Eddie Jordan, who definitely in another life would have been a pirate if he wasn't a Formula One team owner. And of course, Eddie does the pirate growl at the beginning of his podcast that he does with David Coulthard. So, yeah, definitely there's an inner pirate within Eddie Jordan. But Otmar is right. You know, the successful leaders in Formula One drive their teams relentlessly. There's an aggression there. They're very highly adaptable, very agile. You know, you mightn't think of Toto Wolff or Christian Horner as pirates, but they are extremely entrepreneurial. They tear after big, ambitious goals. Zach Brown, you know, another example of a real racer who's just so competitive and competitively minded to drive the whole team forward. So really excellent to hear that. And hopefully we'll speak to Otmar again in the future. Now, in terms of the next episode, well, I'm going to round off the 2024 year by having a chat with a good friend, Jonathan Ledyard, familiar voice to many of you, particularly from his days with the BBC, and indeed he still works with the BBC. And Jonathan and I are going to have a talk through Formula One 2024, but we're going to dig into some of the major stories. So not just Max Verstappen's domination and perhaps the struggles of Checo Perez, but also, of course, that series of momentous news stories, which really started with Lewis Hamilton's decision to leave Mercedes-Benz to join Ferrari next season. Then the shock of Adrian Newey making the decision to depart Red Bull Racing in favour of Aston Martin, and managed by that pirate Eddie Jordan, who looked after the negotiations on that to help Adrian with his new ambition. We'll also talk about some of the things to look forward to in 2025. Quite a few driver lineup changes, some new faces in Formula One indeed, and some new faces in leading teams. Different driver lineups always stimulate a lot of interest and discussion. So join Jonathan and I. We'll have that episode ready for you in just a few days' time, give you hopefully something to listen to during the Christmas and New Year break. And please do join us to talk all things at F1, which is, of course, the business of winning. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the Business of Winning podcast. And if you want to learn more about Performance Insights, simply visit our website at performanceinsights.co.uk, providing expert speakers and hosts from the world of Formula One motor racing to corporate events and conferences worldwide.